Welcome to the next sign that we're seeing in this course. We're starting with the sign of E or Ib, depending on the language. It's very similar, E or Ib, and in Nahuatl, Mallinalli. The human, one of the translations for Mallinalli is the twisted plant. The twisted plant, the crooked plant. Okay? How do we start this? Well, let's start with the Kabawil, the symbol. That's a good way to start. How do you draw it? How do I draw it? Well, what do you need to see for when you're looking for that sign? What are you looking for? Being that there are differences on how the signs are drawn. How can you tell this is the sign of the E? And how can you draw it so that you're telling others that this is the sign of the E? So mainly what you want to do is just draw a human face, okay? Now there's different signs that have faces, that like the way to draw the sign is a face. You have the snake, for example, which is a snake face in some of the versions of the snake. You have it back there. You have the eagle. The eagle also has like a face, and it can also be kind of like a humanoid face. The dog too, it's the face of a dog, and it can be also kind of humanoid. So this is the only face of all the faces that you'll find that is just a human. There's no other animal to it. And one of the ways that this is drawn is, or that I draw it, is doing like this. Okay, so this is like the mouth. So as you can see, it's like a twisted mouth, and it can have some kind of a thing coming out of it and a line coming down. So this would be the nose, and then you want to have the eye. The eye is just a regular eye. Don't draw a snake eye for this sign. And then you have this little kind of twig coming out, and from this twig there are little dots. Okay, so that's the way I draw the human. Now, if I ask myself, what does this mean? Well, first, it's like an ugly human, right? So that's interesting. You're not trying to draw. It's kind of on purpose. You can tell that in the semiotics when you look at many versions, that it is on purpose that the human is ugly. Now, for this thing, sometimes you might see this. So there's what you do need to point out. Even if you make this very simple, like you don't do all that, and you just like draw like a mouth like that, you can do this. What you do want to have is a tooth sticking out. Okay. So you want to draw the tooth, and then just a face, and then you can even maybe not do the twig. You can do something like this, and the dots are also important. So two things that need to show so that we know we're talking about the human is the tooth, first of all, and then the little dots. And if it's a twig, if it's a line like this, whatever version of this, what does it represent? Well, we're going to see, right? So we have the tooth as one of the main symbols, and then you have the dots on a line somehow as one of the other main symbols for this sign. Now, when I draw the mouth like I was doing so, I like to think that this is the road, okay? This is kind of like a road. It has a tooth coming out of it, but it's kind of like a road, like a path. And this is very representative of a concept in Maya worldview, which is the be concept, the path. Okay, so be is a path. It's a road. We saw in earlier modules about the sakbe, the white road, or the white roads that connect different sacred sites or city-states in the Maya lands. But this concept of the be, and now what would be oh, or ohtli. Ohtli is the path, the road. So it represents the human path in this case, the human path of human experiences, okay? So let's go back to so let's take a look at here, for example, and you can see that we see the tooth, we see this line, also like this path. From this line here, you have other lines coming out, and you have the little dots. Those are the important symbols you want to have. Now, for the Mexica version, we see a lower skull, a jawbone. We see a little eye. That can maybe be interpreted as a drop of water, but because of the color, I would be more confident that it's just like a weird eye just laying on top of the jawbone. And then you have these twigs coming out, which are crooked, right? These kind of lines that represent a plant, a bush, like a weed. So that's maybe the best translation, weed, okay? And we're going to see that there's a very, very strong correlation with this sign, this energy, and weed, the cannabis plant itself, okay? And in general, any type of sacred plant, any type of plant that we take. Now, you can see here in the drawing that I put here, that you have two very old wise men, and they're both smoking. It's probably tobacco, but then it could be something else. Now, cannabis didn't exist in the Americas, as far as I understand, but I understand that there's many other things that could be smoked that were not just tobacco, and that would produce some type of an effect. And that wasn't seen as a bad thing. That was actually seen as something that shamans and wise men do, okay? And this one's like just laying down on his back. He's like, almost has that symbol that he is tripping, right? So that's, we're gonna see how that's important for this sign and how that gets described by this sign. So, let me see here, more messages. So let's go on the board and do this. We started with this cycle of the elements with the toch, remember? The fire. So the fire and the water, the jutsi sign, the sign of karma and dharma, is interesting that we went through. The snake is the second cycle, if we're starting from crocodile, is the second cycle of the fire signs. But there's still no concept. It's almost like the snake still doesn't have, and it comes from, remember that before the snake is the cat, the web, right? So this is the snake. Quick way of drawing it. After the cat, after the web. And we understood that web is kind of catching the consciousness, but it's not really digesting it, or it's almost like this subconscious type of consciousness or memory, where we catch it, we trap it, we store it, but we don't really understand it, we don't really unweave it. So there's no understanding that comes into the next intention sign. So the next intention sign, the next sign of intent, which is the snake, acts like there was in the consciousness. It's very unconscious-like, and that's what it represents to the reptilian brain. But then there's after this cycle, so there's this cycle of the next 4 elements. So you have the death sign, really quickly we've drawn it, and then the deer sign, and then you have the canil, the star sign. Now here we have the concretization of consciousness. So here we finally get a really clear, bright image of what has happened. So we finally have like consciousness, some type of at least artistic, mediatic memory, from which then the toch, the next cycle, the cycle that we're on right now, feeds from. So then the toch represents this very conscious sign of intent. It does reflect this intention, that is this consciousness that is gathered, and it almost has this duty consciousness. I need to pay for this. I need to fix this. I need to. So if the snake was very selfish, just thinking about his pleasure and it's the experience of life and hunting down things, then the toch, the fire, is in the water is more like cautious, and it's really not thinking about predating as much as it is giving and paying and being in a duty, making the duty, doing the duty. So the next sign, the one we're on, well, it feeds from this fire. So then we have the dog, right? So with the dog, we get mammalian. This is a spirit sign, but we get the mammalian consciousness, the horizontal consciousness. So we finally get like feelings and the sense of justice and the sense of doing, and of morality, of doing things right, which is kind of closely tied to the toch, right? So you want to do things right. And then we get when this is put into practice, somehow then the time and space begins, and somehow the monkey cares very little about morality and just wants to explore the universe. And so what is the product from that? What is the product from this process? Is the ebb, right? So here you can say you have mammalian consciousness with the tzi. Then you can say with the bats, you're a little bit above it, about that horizontal consciousness. It's not quite the ego that connects the vertical consciousness, but the monkey is not really bound by, I feel good or bad about this, not as much as a dog is. It can allow himself to be a lot more mischievous, not to say evil, right? So that's, like, you can say the monkey consciousness. And if you pay close attention to how the signs are laid, it does illustrate the fact that there is a kind of like a subhuman kind of consciousness. The level right below it is the monkey. The level below that is the dog. We like that one because, and we can even make a thesis that humanity is kind of stuck there, or maybe here and here, like the good people and the bad people. And but above that, you have human consciousness, right? You have the human itself. That's why we have the human sign. And this kind of hierarchy is going to continue onto the next sign that we're going to get to see today. We're going to get to see these two signs, which is the Ach, which is as the Arguelles called it, the Skywalker, which is the Christ consciousness, which is the superior consciousness, which is this consciousness that tries to be above the human ones. Okay? So by understanding the relationship or the relation of one sign to the one before it and to the one after it, we can say a lot. Okay? That goes for all the signs, but for this is a special case. That's why I took my time to come here to the drawing board and explain this. So that we're going to study right now is the human consciousness, right? And it is then a consciousness sign, a sign of earth element that represents consciousness, that represents the four elements. The human. So it comes after the monkey, and the monkey is a little mischievous, and the monkey is the one that allows time, and is the sign of time, of the Maya, of the unweaving of time, of this illusion of lineality, which is an illusion, but it's also a reality. I mean, we can break that illusion. We can certainly, our consciousness, our souls go beyond that. But then at the same time, we are kind of stuck in some type of reality where there's laws, and these laws are somehow linear, okay? Or they appear to be, or we are assembling it so it is that way, okay? And we understand then that in this illusionary space, in this reality, we are beyond the concept of morality, and there is no physical impediment to practice evil, right? There is no actual, even if we think it goes against natural law, and we can get into that subject, but that's a long subject. And by the way, I do want to think about recording this natural law course in English, because I have it in Spanish. It's really, really interesting. Something I learned from, and maybe you guys have seen it. You can go take it with him, with Mark Passio. I don't know if you've seen him. Really great information about natural law. Though, I mean, I like Mark Passio, but then a friend of mine nicknamed him the jackhammer, because he is very jackhammery in his teachings. So I think some people would actually like me giving that teaching, because I can be a little softer. I don't need to be a jackhammer to teach that. But it explains, the natural law explains how we humans are breaking natural law all the time. The idea of human law is against natural law. But then we can just dive deep into philosophical explorations of all of this, and these signs, this calendar, this ancestral knowledge of the Cholquij is really useful for this, because it allows us to see things from each one of the perspectives. It almost gives us a code for each one of the positions, and then we learn that there are progressions, and these progressions are weaving, and it just gives us a really broad diversity of concepts that help us understand that there's no one single truth, that it's all a weaving of different perspectives, right? So we have to place ourselves right now in the perspective of the air sign, of the human sign. We cannot explain the S sign from the perspective of the Z sign, of the dog sign, because then we would get into conflict, right? So for the E is the consciousness of human. So what is a human? What's a human? How does it differentiate from either a monkey or a mammal, or something that even is beyond a human, like an angel? Let's think of an angel, or this elevated being. Okay. Well, this exists in the native worldviews, even in Andean worldviews, where there's a very clear word, and this is a key. These are key words for this sign, and I'll write them down. Now that I can have a better, with this mic, I can use the board a lot more. So there's a word in Nahuatl. We'll come to the Nahuatl language, which is Masewali. Masewali, as it should be written by indigenous standards, or as they did write it at some point, Spanished with C and HU instead of W. But it's the same thing. Masewali. Now this got translated in many ways. This word was used by the colonists, by the invaders, the conquistadors. I don't like that word. The colonists, that's the best word. The people that came and colonized. And it was the word that then got adopted by the Spanish to call the natives. So that's what they would call the natives. So the natives themselves then call themselves this as a way to differentiate themselves from the Spanish, right? From the criollos, which are the criollos in Spanish is like the ones that are grown here, which it kind of specifies that, well, maybe they didn't come from Spain, at least not that generation, but they were the sons or daughters from the Spanish, right? So they're like the whites, the whites and the non-whites, to make it quite simple, right? So Masewali kind of became a word that meant the non-whites, the natives, the indigenous, the indios, the Indians, if you want it. Okay? But then this word has a deeper meaning, right? A very deep meaning, and it means, it does differentiate. It is a word that it discriminates, and discrimination is a bad thing in a broad sense, but it is a good thing on specifics. We do need to be able to make distinctions and discriminate, to tell things that are different, right? In that sense, we do want to discriminate. So there's two categories, which is the Masewali is one, and the other one is the Tecostli. I'm going to write it in this better way. Tecostli, which is in the Huastecan variant of Nahuatl. Now, a Central Mexican variant, it would be Tecustli, right? But it's the same thing. Tecostli or Tecustli, which a common translation or an easy translation would be Lord. Okay. So then, of course, when the Spanish came, this word became the word for the Spanish. So they were the lords, and these guys were the vasallos, the pawns, okay? But let's go before that, and let's understand the concept before it was applied into the colonies, where even the native civilizations, there were these two categories existed very distinctly, where you had lords, kings, people of really high education, of very high knowledge, of a lot of training, a lot of studies, probably even with some powers, some magical powers, right? And that's why you became kind of superhuman. And you can, and I would think that if you were to go into the past, the further you go into, the closer you get to the classical period, but even if you go way back before that, you can start relating this to the actual angels or this, or the ones, or the humans that became kind of demigods, if you want to think it that way, okay? Because they did develop special powers, and they did somehow guide humanity, and they did bring about civilization, right? So the Masewali are all the other people that are, they don't have that illumination, they don't have that knowledge, they don't have that power, and you would think they are lesser, but no. Here's the twist on this. A way to translate Masewali is the one that deserves creation. So these guys are the creators, right? So these guys are the creators, co-creators, let's call them, because then they're not the only ones, but they do kind of created the pyramids, civilization, developed agriculture, brought about technologies, developed the calendars, etc., etc. They did create something. The co-creators, and now this is turning kind of too whitish. And the Masewali then, they are the receivers of creation, or the people that deserve the creation, or the caretakers of creation. So that's really important. So in one sense, there's two senses to this. The sense of the gift, of receiving the gift, right? So you're like really gifted. If you're a Masewali, you're gifted because you were gifted the creation. You received the creation. And think about it. And there's a whole extensive teaching about this in native worlds, and you know, that some native groups, tribes, nations teach this to their kids, where we need to have this consciousness that is very not present in the Western world, that you didn't have to do a single thing, and now you can profit from everything that everybody else has done here. Okay? You're just born into a world where you can take advantage of everything that has been created. You can eat everything that is here. Food did not just appear here. We had to engineer it. It was engineered. It was developed. Everything that we eat as humans, everything that we know, everything that we're using, the languages, everything was created through hard labor, through a lot of work. And these guys did a lot of that work. So we're just receiving that gift of life, right? So this is, for example, in the Andean world, this consciousness is very important when you're thinking about having kids. Because this idea, this very Western idea of actually seeing, having offspring as a kind of a choice. Everything in the Western world is kind of shelf consciousness oriented, right? Everything's just a product of consumption. So having kids is not a path in life. It's not something that is natural and that will happen to you because that's what's natural, that's what being a human is. No, it's something that you get to choose from because everything's a choice, because everything is, you're just a consumer and you get to consume whatever the fuck you want. So that's not a really good consciousness. So when you put yourself in the Masewali consciousness, and I have some maybe very bad video about this in in Spanish. So I'm going to do these teachings that I can fit them here because it fits into this sign here. So you guys are lucky for me to give this teaching here because we would need more time to go deeper into all of these, these teachings about creation, about how you need to have the consciousness that the way that you pay back for you receiving life is giving life. So having kids, I mean, it's obviously nothing. It's not if your life happens to be a life where you didn't have them or you don't have them. That's great. And then a wise man would say, then you have them. They might not be blood offspring, but you certainly have offspring. You do always have offspring. Okay. And that's one of the ways that you pay back what you have been gifted, what you have been given. It's part of the balance. If you don't balance that out, if you're looking to be healthy and plentiful, you need to bring this into consideration. Okay, right? How much has the Western consciousness taken this consciousness away from me, and now I don't have kids. I'm 45 years old and I don't have kids, and probably I won't, right? At least not blood ones. Not that I can't, but and how much do I actually feel like I actually would want this, right? To be complete, to have this experience. So everything comes down to, in this sign, to experience, right? And I'm going to see that. But let me finish first the fact that the other side of the Masewali word. One side is he's gifted, you're gifted, the gift of life, right? Of creation. And then you're responsible for it. That's the other side. You are the caretaker, right? So there's a very beautiful concept in the Andean world, in Quechua, the runa, which is just the word for, like a Quechua person. How do you say a Quechua person in Quechua? Runa, right? And the same thing goes for Nahuatl. How do you call a Nahuatl speaking person in Nahuatl? Masewali. Even and it's amazing that both things exist in both languages, because then you have Masewal Tlachtol, or Runasimi, which is the language Tlachtol Simi of humans, because then this translates to humans, right? So Runa is the human in the Andean world in Quechua, or since I'm more familiar with Aymara language, it's the Hake. Hake is the human. Now, what does being a human entail? Well, it entails everything I've mentioned. And it entails something that for us in the circle of medicine becomes kind of like a big thing. It becomes a kind of like a lighthouse, a light that we want to ship to, or want to get to that, because we have to realize that we're not even that right now. And then we would go deep into the analytics of the modern world, and dehumanization process, that is agenda that is carried out by whoever takes care of that agenda, and they're facts, right? We're constantly being dehumanized, right? So we really have to, first of all, there is a part of us that it's always human. It won't ever get completely dehumanized. And then there's the other perspective, the other place we have to put ourselves into where, yes, we've been severely dehumanized. So we have to see ourselves as how dehumanized we are, so that we can walk to being more human. We want to recover that humanity that has been taken from us, right? And what does that entail? That entails, and this is kind of like the one of the goals that we have in the Circle of Medicine that we're trying to facilitate, because we're not just trying to facilitate knowledge through courses like this, but we're actually trying to facilitate the creation of new tribes and communities that can live in places in nature. And we have a 32,000 hectare territory in the Amazon to carry this out, but we're looking into other territories as well, where people that are not Masewali, they're not natives, can actually join the project of being humans. Because we do have to put ourselves in that stance where we've been just ripped away from being humans. Now, what does that entail? It entails, being a human entails, and it's totally the other story that we're told by the modern world. The modern world tells us that being a human is being above nature. Somehow that nature is against us. That what makes us human by definition is that we have conquered nature. So this is, as you can see, we start seeing, even in the scientific narrative, a very colonial worldview, right? Which then, if you go deep into science, you discover that it's all wrong, that in fact nature is the most advanced technology there is. That plants, for example, let's bring up this image because it's relevant, that the plants that are out there, that we have very little knowledge of because we've been ripped apart from this world, where all these plants exist just for us, right? Like tobacco. They really have been developed, have been co-grown, co-created to serve humans. I mean, human is part of the weaving of creation. It's not apart from it. It's not above it. It's not. So we're going to be getting told this story, and there might be some truth to that story where we came from another world as humans, that we're actually aliens. And that might be true in the past, but then what is not true in the recent past is that we've been here already for quite some time, and that the whole planet has been shaped with us, right? We're not foreigners to this planet whatsoever. We're a part of it. And so even the plants have developed the skills to heal our problems. So when we want to bring back, and this is going to be relevant as Gordon is commenting recently about that once you go into the right healing story, that everything starts healing, right? You just need to find the right healing story. So this kind of goes that way a little bit, where for us in the Circle of Medicine, the right healing story includes, maybe you're not there yet, but you're walking there, right? You're walking your way to becoming human, to recovering your humanity. And that means, here's the key thing, becoming a caretaker of a part of the planet. I am currently strictly not even that, okay? I do, maybe you could say I am a caretaker. I have been 15 years with this territory that is being preserved in the Amazon, trying to do things for that, trying to make this work so that we can go and create a community there. And you could say, no, you are a caretaker of that place, but then I'm not in that place right now, and I haven't been there for a while. And so personally, for me, I don't feel that connection as much as I would like to. I mean, I relate here to the mountain here, to Nahuacampatepetl, and to the Iztactepetl, to the first and the fifth largest mountains in Mexico. I can see them right here from outside my window. And there's a cloud forest here, and I go out to it and I relate to it. But then I have to come back into this city, and then I'm isolated, and I have no earth here outside in front. So if I want to grow something, I need to put pots, and this is fragmented, right? And this is isolated, and there's bars here in my window, and there's bars down there, and there's borders and lines and cables, and there's so many things that fragment me from having this. I'm not in the forest right now. I need to go out there. I need to take a car to get to the forest. It's not that I can just walk into the forest from my house. My house is not in the forest. So I'm lacking that. I need that, and I'm soon going to get there, okay? To a place where I can actually walk outside my house and I'm in earth. I'm not in this weird concept of in the city, right? So this is a lot of things need to come into thought for this, right? And this is all extremely relevant. This is the huge teaching of the human. This is what human is teaching right now. I mean, what this sign is teaching, what this Nahual is teaching. It's teaching us, how much of a human are you? How much do you want to heal? Because then this sign is very relevant for healing, okay? So much that it relates, the symbol in the Mexica version it's any type of healing plant, any type of medicinal plant, okay? You can say this is the sign of the medicinal plant, okay? So there's a twist to this, okay? And that's why one of the translations is twisted plant. So this twist is what we saw in the drawing I make of the human, where the mouth is a little more twisted and curved. And this, because this sign represents the curved path of being a human, which is not a straight path, because we do have a sign for a straight path, which is the sign that comes after this one. So we have a curved path, and these curves are all the experience. You would think, what's the point of the curves? Why can't we just draw a straight line? Well, that's exactly what defines being a human and being something that is even above it or better than it, okay? So something or someone that is above it and better than it can really just take the straight line and go straight from A to B. It doesn't need to go through all the curves. We as humans, we need to go through all the curves. In a way, we're all humans, because I hope that at some point, you know, it's almost like we are as this is from, it's almost like even if we haven't heard this before, and even if we hear it, we feel uncomfortable with it, because we've been kind of maybe fond, we're comfortable, we've created our comfort zone in this fragmented world and this humanized reality, right? And here you have some guy telling you that the way to heal, the way to get better, the way to become a human, to recover your humanity, is find a way to come back into nature. Nobody wants to hear that. That's the big audience loser right there. Every time I would post something like that, people would just unfollow me. That's why I don't have a big audience, because I tell the truth. But that's the truth. That's what any native is going to tell you, right? So I know that some people will come as a hard thing. No, wait, I just want the packaged version of this, right? Me getting my hands on the floor, my hands dirty on the ground. That's exactly what you need. That's exactly what we need. We need to come back to earth. That's kind of like the only thing you can really do, the only really real healing path there is, right? Everything else is coadjuvant to that, accessing the great mysteries and knowledges and wisdoms of ancestral peoples. Well, that's going to help, and you can certainly do a lot while you find a way to come back to earth. But then you need to consider coming back to earth and get out of all this imagination that tells you that is being less, that is not advanced, that is because we have that program inside us that tells us, oh, we can't go back in time, because we've evolved from the earth. That's past, but that's all the colonizer story. That if we are to really understand this other story, that's what this course is about. Is trying to tell this other story. Then if we understand this story, then if you want to understand it, then please make an effort and understand that. Understand that what we need to find is a way to come back to a harmonious living in earth, where we are caretakers of the earth, and where we have a relationship as caretakers of the earth. And that's how we're going to heal earth, and that's how we're going to heal ourselves, and that's how we're going to heal humanity, and that's how we get rid of all the problems that are out there. And we do have the power ourselves, each one of us, to walk that way. Okay? And I say walk this way or walk that way because I totally understand, and this Nawal is really nice. It's really great because it gives us that space, that sacred space of understanding that it might take us a few curves to get there. Okay? So this is the consciousness, the human consciousness. The sign of the human is the sign of consciousness, which is the human consciousness, which is the consciousness that we fuck up. Okay? We seriously fuck up. And I love the language. I love the fact that I can use this language. Sorry, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but it makes it more fun for some. Because it's like more raw, right? A human life is that. We can seriously get out of the way. We can seriously go on a curve. Like we want to go that way, and then we're just going this way, okay? You're like, wait, dude, you have to go that way. That's the way you want to go. Yeah, but I'm going to find my own way, and that's valid. This is not what I was saying. That's valid. That's okay. Go ahead and take that curve. Maybe that curve will then curve around and take you that way. So the human sign of human, the human Nawal or Tonal, speaks of the human experiences, and that is represented by these little lines and dots here, and the path, and the path of humanity, the path of being on the path of the human path, the path of human existence that has curves, that has bumps, where we make mistakes, where we go wrong, but then that is the wisdom. So this can become a sign of a person. Now let's talk about the person. Okay? Person of a S sign or Ep sign, which then means tooth. Then the tooth, this square tooth, and that's why it's an important symbol. It's what differentiates us, these square tooth, from other animals, right? So our teeth are very distinct for humans, right? Some other animals have different kind of teeth. So that's why the tooth is important as a symbol for this sign, because it represents human tooth, the human teeth. And you have to draw that. Then from this sign, I've went into deep meditations about everything that happens or doesn't happen when we lose a tooth, right? There's a whole lot of wisdom there. There's a long story about how important it is to not lose teeth, to take care of your teeth. How many bad things can come when you actually start losing teeth. It's like even without proper treatment, it can become a life and death situation. Now we look at the ancestral world, we see a lot of very intricate and complex dentistry work and even adornment of the teeth. So it was very important for them, taking care of the teeth and even adorning them. They would put emeralds, like incrustations of emeralds in the teeth. And if you go into native worlds today, you will see a lot of people with gold, which you can say that looks awful, but that's a very native thing, to actually adorn your teeth with precious things like gold. And that's a very human, there's a very much of this sign. So a person of this sign, what's one of the telltale signs of a person of this sign? Is that they like to adorn themselves quite a lot. It's very much of you can even see it as like the hippie look, right? Like somebody that likes to wear a lot of necklaces or a lot of things in the earrings and just adorn themselves with lots of stuff. It's very much of a telltale sign or somebody that wears a hat. It's a sign of people that like to commerce. They're very good they have very good social skills. So they're very good at selling things and buying things. But they also have this, they're not really into, and I haven't met anyone that is kind of in maybe because I don't have a lot of successful businessman kind of friend, right? And I like to think that people of this sign they kind of tend to stick into a kind of, if you want to call it, a humble level of humanity. They're not really looking to be extremely prosperous, right, and rich and wealthy. They like the road. They like the road. That's maybe one of the telltale signs. They like the road. They like the ground. They like to be on the ground. They like knocking door to door kind of thing. They like selling things on the street. They like that kind of, you want to see it that way, low life kind of personality, right? So that's one of the traits of the people, that they like living their human path. They like the curves. They like the mistakes. And when they become older as they age, and if they achieve their sign, if they meet their destiny, if they learn from their Nahual, then they can become very wise people, because they've done it, they've went through it, they've been there. Okay, so they can become very good advisors, very good medicine men and women, because they've been there, they've done that, they've made that mistake, they've suffered that disease, they've had that experience, and there's no better way to get advice about something that from someone that has done it and has overcome it. So that's, in the broad sense, what you can tell about the people of this sign. Now, another thing about the people, so let's go into this crooked plant thing. The crooked plant concept, where, so there's some plants that shoot straight, and there's some plants that don't. Some plants that like to kind of tweak and bend, and the symbol in this, for this sign, becomes that too. Somebody that doesn't really like to be straightforward. Somebody that is not completely honest. Okay? So this is another thing that we might see in people of this sign. Is somebody that is kind of not that honest, or at least he or she is honest in their own way, but it's not a straightforward honesty. They're not that transparent. Okay? It's not in their nature. They twist things. They can become very manipulative people. And it can get pretty bad. And I've actually, for some reason, have had more than one relationship with a woman of this sign. And I like to think of them as Mallinalli. And I do maybe have this attraction to, because they can become very medicine womanish, okay? So this is kind of like an inner destiny, where they do learn to do therapy. There's different types of being medicine, man or woman. I'm more into the part where I'm sure I could maybe, with the experience I have and the relationships I have with certain plants, help you and treat you with my hands and with my therapies and with my plants. But I'm more focused into the teachings and the guiding and the things I can do, so that you really just shift into a better healing story. Okay? That's kind of what I focus on. But there's people that their actual talent is doing the treatment themselves. For example, I was very briefly in a relationship with a woman that was of this sign, and I've never, and once I got sick at some point, and she treated me with needles, and I've gotten treatments with needles before, but her hands had something that no other hands I've ever felt before had. They have a very special power to do the actual hands-on treatment and healing. And that's one of maybe their destiny traits, one of the ways that they can channel their Nahual and their big talents, right? And maybe one of the things that make them attractive to me, that I am on the path of spirit and of medicine and of native traditions. Maybe that's the kind of woman that kind of shows up in my life path. A woman that is into healing, into plant medicine, etc. Or any type of medicine or alternative medicine. I have to point that out, right? Because then Modern pharmaceutical medicine is not medicine. It's not seeking to heal, really. It's just a business, and a very big and bad one. Of course, there's some things that you can rescue from that and integrate, of course, but as long as your paradigm is not that paradigm. So this is many times well understood by the human. Now, I do find that they have a hard time sometimes kind of breaking free from many of the shackles of, even if they seemingly are on the path of sovereignty and becoming free and conscious from the domestication of the modern world. I sometimes see them as having a hard time sometimes getting rid of some of the shackles, of making their path less curvy. They have very curvy lives and destinies. And that's something that you can read, right? If you make a reading for a person of this sign, that's something that you can forecast for them. You can tell them, well, your life is going to be full of curves, right? You're going to go into very deep alleys, into very off-road ways, and hopefully you can find your way back. And hopefully you can find some other thing to tell them in the reading that will help them straighten out their path, because they can become very twisted. And as people too, that's a very common thing. They can become twisted, manipulative, where, have you ever, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, with when somebody is apparently giving you advice, or apparently in the position of being the one that is kind of giving you the psychological advice, but then they're fixed in the perspective and they're seeing you as doing the wrong, and they don't want to lose that position of them being the medicinal ones, of giving the advice. So maybe they have a problem. Maybe this discussion that you have with them would need some kind of, hey, look at what you're doing wrong. I'm willing to look at my wrongs, but can you look at your wrongs too, please? Let's find where our real misunderstanding. But I've seen that they get fixed into, like, oh, I'm the medicine person. I'm the wise one, and you're the one that is. So they can wrongly diagnose, and they have an ego of that, and they can have a very dark and twisted personality or consciousness because of this, right? Where they're not willing to see their own wrongs, or seeing how maybe their diagnosis can be wrong, and this can become bad. And then be careful of healers that are in this kind of twisted thing where they're not open to seeing some middle ground. What they really want is just to feel that they know it all, they can tell you all, that they know what they're seeing, that your behavior or your symptoms fit into what they're sure is your problem. But many times that is not the problem. And many times, and that happens everywhere and all the time, information can fit into a narrative. So you can totally argument and validate a narrative based on evidence. You can always have evidence to validate a narrative, but that doesn't mean that the narrative is right. Okay? It can be a fucking twisted narrative. Okay? It speaks a lot about what we've been seeing in the modern world, right? And speaks a lot about how modern medicine works, right? Very twisted, kind of. Okay? So So some keys here to understand this sign, a person of the sign. Now, how does a day of the sign manifest? Well, you can expect situations, you can expect curves, but then it's if we don't negatively scope it, let's try to not do that with any of the signs. If we just completely work on the positive, on seeing the positive and bringing forward the positive traits of the sign, which is something I've been learning to do, because at first when I began studying and practicing this, that I had more of a tendency to fall into the because that's one of the big discoveries, right? Is wow, there's so much negative in each one of the signs, and if you read books of what the first colonists wrote about the signs, these signs, from what the natives would tell them, there are like 2 signs that have good comments, and the rest of the signs are like the really bad sign. It says just, but this is very oversimplistic, right? So, but first it's a good thing to understand, wow, you know, there's so many wrongs, there's so many bad things we need to work on, okay? That's great. And then you want to not get stuck in that, and then see the fact that we're seeing just a part of the universe that can be oversimplified into a negative trait, and then we want to heal that. We want to see how that is not the case, and there's just a lot more to it. But we need to bring that about, because I mean, there's so much work to do still in all of this, and manifesting this code and bringing this code into our lives and into the humanity, because I think it's a great code. So the positive things we need to see and bring forth from each one of the Nawals. The Nawals need this from us. They need us to bring this forward. It's not just saying the positive. No, we actually need to find how that positive part of that Nawal can be applied and how it actually applies. So the way I do that when the day of the A comes is by actually feeling some kind of comfort, some kind of sacred space where I know that I won't be so strongly, I won't criticize myself. I won't be criticized by myself. I won't ask so much of myself. I won't be so strict, right? So demanding on how straight I want to be, because we have this tendency as humans to want to become superhumans. And that's what we're going to go into right now, the next sign, okay? We all want to get there, actually. It's natural, right? So there's a lot of acceptance. This is a sign of a lot of acceptance of the fact that, yes, we want to get there, but we're not there. And so when a day of this sign comes, lately it's been a very comfortable day for me, because I can actually allow myself to accept all the curves that are coming and all the experiences that are coming. And this is kind of a key thing maybe in the spiritual practice, because with all the New Age stuff, we get fed a lot of the straight path stuff, right? And which is great if we can balance it with this human side, okay? With the fact that, okay, we want to get there, but we don't want to just tell that narration. We also want to tell this narration where I'm screwing up. I just screwed up. I'm not perfect. I have a lot of problems still to deal with. I have a lot of situations I need to deal with. I want to see those situations. I want to see what they are. I want to bring them about. I want to work with them. I'm willing to do that. I want to smoke it, right? So here's another key to understand this sign is when you smoke cannabis, or when you smoke a plant that if you want to see it that way, it distorts. It makes you see not straight, okay? Or even just the drinks would apply in this sign too. And there's a relationship with this sign and the gods of ecstasy, right? And with the number 5, where getting stoned or getting drunk can actually, if we are able to embrace it as something that is natural, and that is the thing, we can get the stigma out. That's the key thing, right? Getting the stigma out. That's the hard part. If we can get the stigma out, then we can actually allow ourselves to go into those states in a balanced way, where it allows us to find better ways to straighten up. Does it make sense? That's kind of the teaching here, and that's kind of what plants do when they heal us. They shift us in curvy ways so then we can straighten up. They kind of teach us, right? It's kind of like they whip us, right? Sometimes they whip our body. They're like, okay, you're not working properly, liver, bam, there you go. I'm gonna whip you with this, right? And it activates it, right? And then you get healed. So there's that twisted healing concept found here, okay? Of sometimes we want to allow ourselves to go into, and it speaks of homeopathic medicine principles, where you expose yourself to the negative to become resistant to it. You expose yourself to something a toxin that is similar to the symptom you have, or to the problem you have, because it activates you to become resilient to it. So that's kind of all found here in this sign. Okay, we're almost done. Let's just do almost done with this sign. So there's one other key thing here. Absolutely thing. Everything that we've spoken about, and I haven't mentioned that, and I have to mention it, you have to put it like up there as like the key word for this, is free will, okay? So this is a sign, this is the consciousness, this is a part of the universe that applies, this is the law of free will, okay? Out of all the laws there is in the universe, if each one of the nawalas, of the 20 nawalas, is like a law of the universe, well, this is the law of free will. Of the fact that, hey, whatever the dog says, on whatever the next sign says, oh, I'm a crooked, twisted motherfucker, says the next sign, and the dog says you're an evil motherfucker because you do wrongs. What my law says, I have the fucking free will, free choice to do whatever the fuck I want. That's what this guy says. I have free will. I can choose. And if I choose to do wrong, and of course, other laws, other wisdoms will tell me this is wrong, you shouldn't do that. My law is going to show me that down the road, because guess what? We are bound by cause and effect. And that's natural law. And that's what the Toch says. The Toch is the fire sign of this cycle. And what does the Toch say? Whatever it is, you're going to pay for it. So go ahead. You want to harm something? You want to play around by... and we do it, little kids. Little kids in nature and in cities or whatever it is, they experiment their free will. They exercise their free will. And they go and torture animals, and they go and kill insects, and you could think, oh, that's very bad. But they do it. Little kids torture animals and kill animals if somebody doesn't screw up their free will. Somebody doesn't come and say, oh, don't do that. I mean, it's great to to receive the teaching of, hey, do you think that poor little animal's having a fun time with you poking it all day long? Let's see what comment we get. Have to ask about the pictograph at the bottom of the page. Some blowing smoke up someone's butt. It's a minute about, okay. Yes, I did speak a little bit about it. I guess these are just two guys. It's kind of the same guy, and they're just smoking. And I would say he's not like blowing smoke, he's smoking, one of them. The other one's is also smoking, but it's on his back because it's tripping. That's what I interpret from it. And it's very representative of the fact that we can actually learn a lot by taking twisted paths, or by getting outside of a clear, transparent, pure consciousness and actually getting intoxicated. Okay. Okay. What else? Free will. That's the important thing. We just have to do the cross now because we are eating on the Ach time. So for the Maya cross, we can see the wrongs. The human falls easily into the traps of things that are wrong, that are bad, that are, or not, maybe not judgmentally wrong and bad, but things that we then later want to unwind from, that we want to solve, that we want to better, that we want to improve. And that is represented by the K'at in the conception sign, meaning that also as a child, and then if we don't grow up, if you're an air sign, if you don't grow up, growing up means being able to untangle from the problems and learning to not fall into the problems, to not become nosy, to not become gossipy, to not want to falsely diagnose others, right? To become humble. There's a very strong development of humility in this sign, of learning to just understand, I don't really know everything. Okay, I've had all these experiences, and I could tell you a lot of things, but at the same time, I need to keep myself on the ground, knowing that I might just not know something. I don't know everything, and it would be very healing if I keep that consciousness when I am trying to give you advice. Because of course then, if I sound more confident and I just straight up shoot at you some type of diagnosis, even if I'm not really that sure of it, it's going to look better for me, and you're going to take it in more easy. So let's balance that out. Let's stay humble. Let's stay real, right? Now, for that, this sign has the two hemispheres, which help him a lot. One, and he has the Tihash, the breaker of the dimensions, the ability to see through different layers. And on the other side, it has death as a connection to the ancestors, as a connection to ancestry. So this makes this sign a very connected, down-to-earth, realistic, and wise sign, if they meet their destiny, if they can grow from the infancy sign, which would be a K'at, right? So if you can grow up, then you can actually be a very wise person, a very healing person. And that is what it's going to want to do towards the destiny sign, the sign of Ahpu, of Ahau. Become a messenger of truth, a messenger of love, but at the same time, be a hunter for what it wants, being realistic to the fact that you're just living for yourself, that we do live in a community space, but at the same time, we are individuals, so we cannot just erase our individuality, and we need to actually seek things that we want just for ourselves. We really need to be selfish in some sense. We cannot get completely rid of selfishness. Okay, so that's the teaching that the Ahpu would give. The that would be what the would look up to. It would be the Ahpu. Now the family are the signs that we like. I like to call them the good guys, the nice guys, the healing guys, the natural guys, the sign of nobility, the noch, the sign of purity and transparency, the ik, the sign of the gathering and the healing hand, the kech, of the service, and then the human path, which of all the fours, maybe this is the one that I can sometimes see more crooked people into. This one down here, of all these four signs. But then you can also have crooked people in any sign. So that's the family, harmonic signs, all of the same element. Let's take a